All right. Hopefully volume is good. So good morning, afternoon, evening, whatever it is, wherever you happen to be. I am Brent, aka Werewolf Doctor's handle on basically all the socials. Links are in the chat to the major ones. Threads, Patreon, Ko-Fi, all the various places. YouTube, although I don't post anything over there really. Here, Instagram, all the places. Let's see. Today I'm looking at. I've got some extra time going on today. So a couple things I was looking at or thinking about were some. I just finished a book and was thinking about some world building aspects of that have come into that stuck into my head, as well as a few other things that stood out in terms of, let me double check what my original thoughts were here. Some inspiration that comes out of that, and also working and just going to work on some things that I am setting up for Patreon for October, as all of this month's stuff has already been created. There we go. Okay, everything seems to be working. Okay, cool. So, as far as... and nobody's chatting at the moment. Okay, cool. I think I'm going to start off with working on this document, because the other bits, while interesting in my head, are maybe a little less so in some respects. So basically, and I mentioned this in the last stream, but I'll mention again in case the two people we have here are different from previously. What I did back in January, February, March, somewhere around there, is I put together a list or a collection of different random generators for world building purposes, for schools, for libraries, for places in general, organizations, and shape-shifting species, peoples, races, whatever you want to call it. And then back in June, about June, I rolled up about July, August, September, October, November, December, 7 months worth of 7 of each, basically, to use and develop for Patreon and Ko-Fi files for people. So last time, which would have been Tuesday, I did a library. This one is a generic place, or not a generic place, but it has some oddities to it because of being randomly generated. Let's see, so this case, I already went through and did some notes to kind of try to make sense of the randomness that was pulled up. But basically, I divided places into a few different categories. So we have the activity, which would be, is it active, is it inactive, is it hidden, is it known, all these sorts of things, down to one person. And then type of place, what's the purpose, what's the goal, location, urban, rural, wilds, wilderness, all that good stuff. How big is it? Population in general terms, origins, public, private, why did it come into existence, who did it come into existence from, and whether it has any special properties. This one, which will be named Euphoria, has no special properties of note, aside from the fact that it is really big and also hidden, which makes for some interesting decisions. So, let's see, starting this out. Euphoria is an active, and purpose is entertainment. So an active business that's is known by name and reputation, although its location remains a mystery. Okay, that takes out that part. Cool. Activity will also get things like the what it looks like, appearance, all that fun stuff. So let's see. The important part of the structure is concealed behind the exteriors of a city block's worth of buildings and businesses. Let's see. Let's see. Along with the outer walls of these shops, a room or two of depth remains to maintain the illusion. Basically, I figured, well, on one hand, a massive hidden place could be hidden magically, could be interdimensional, could be in a pocket dimension, pocket realm, something along those lines. But that seemed a bit done, trite, however you want to put it. So I decided to be a little more creative in this case and have it within a city block, multiple layers, multiple floors, but the exterior still looks like original residences, shops, that sort of thing. So all of those are still in place. They maintain the illusion. However, the interior walls were mostly removed to create a single large space of how many floors? Big city, decent sized population, let's say four stories. That's those floors are subdivided into, how big do we want to make this? It's immense in size, so we'll say a couple dozen spaces each for a couple dozen spaces, each dedicated to a specific type of entertainment. Because this is intended to be, or this was a place of the type of place that came up in this random roll was a place of entertainment. So we got this massive, hidden but known place that is there to entertain. However, it also has purpose of monitoring or observing. So that makes things a little more interesting in some regards. So let's see. Let's let's see, at its core, if I can spell properly, Euphoria is a place of entertainment. It exists to keep guests, visitors, patrons amused and what's another word I want to throw in there? We'll stick with amused and let's find a quick second term here. Amused and actually let's go with this. Finding synonyms are wonderful. Distracted, delighted, enthralled. Enthralled, I like that in this case. That kind of gets the secondary stuff behind it or under it. So, what else? To that end, the various rooms and other divisions of the massive complex are devoted to, let's see, what all do they do? Well, they will have games of chance, whether cards, dice, or other randomness. Let's see, stage shows of music and other entertainments. What else would we throw in there? Games of chance, stage shows. What else could we throw in there? Actually, instead of other entertainments, we'll throw plays. And what else? Demonstrations of magic and food and drink of myriad sorts. Yes, that works. Okay. So the place of entertainment's goal is to keep guests there. It's there to keep them amused, entertained, enthralled. Entertained is doubled up. Let's see, I like that. Okay, cool. So the purpose. Okay. Beneath the surface of the surface entertainments, Euphoria has a hidden purpose. It was created to monitor and observe beings of off-world origins, whether demonic, divine, or simply dimensional or planar travelers. The goal was to draw in, the goal is, not was, is to draw such people, such beings, some of them not necessarily, to the observers rather than trying to find each being individually. watch on them. Yeah, that looks good. Let's see, we need to have an internal description here. Put that in there, the placeholder. Okay. Yes, excellent. Where is this located? So is concealed within the largest city of the nation, relatively near a concentration of arcanists. Basically assuming that many of these, any kind of dimensional off-world travelers are likely to be arriving somewhere around where you have, you know, wizards, sorcerers, whatever you want to call them. Let's see. How do we deal with this? Concealed in the largest nation, it's the largest city in the nation, relatively near concentration of arcanists. But its location, exact location, is only known to trusted patrons who cannot tell anyone the location, but can bring up to 2 guests at a time. This inability to speak of the this inability, we have to figure a way to hide it. So this inability to speak of the location is enforced by a divine ward placed on the main entrance. That affects anyone who passes through the doorway. Put it that way. I like that. Okay. So how big is this? It is, we roll up immense. Immense seems maybe a little bit too big. I'm thinking that would be a little overly large. Because it's filling an entire city block. So I'm thinking we might scale that back a little bit. Even if it is over 4 stories, which could make it significantly larger in effect. So we're looking at square footage, entire city block by 4 in height. That's going to be pretty darn reasonably big, especially for a typical fantasy time period and such. Yeah, it doesn't really make that huge a difference for these purposes. So the interior of Euphoria proper fills the entirety of a city block and covers 4 floors. This, in effect, or this creates a huge amount of square footage for each floor and for all of them combined. The sheer size of the floor plan is why is a major reason that the interior was subdivided into key sections. Okay, cool. That looks good. Also need their entry. Entry needs to go under there somewhere too. So, environment. Yeah, well, that's easy. Okay, cool. Entry comes through any of the front business doors, funneled inside to a single double door that allows people to enter Euphoria proper. That'll work. Cool. That looks good. Okay, population, which is going to be staff. I did not divide up the population in this case, which is going to make things interesting. Average, so compared to the size of the building, the staff is rather small in number. However, in comparison to regular sized to casinos or theaters, the staff would be considered average in size. Let's see, the entire staff is composed of living beings native to the world. All are in some way devoted to the deity who founded, or in whose name the Euphoria was founded. Some are full clergy, others are the equivalent of temple guards, and others are laypersons in service to the deity. That looks good. I like that. Nice. Okay, so it's coming along well. Still have to do origins, still have to get an interior description, which will take a little bit, but those are looking pretty good so far. So I'm pretty happy with that as a starting point. What I'm going to take a little bit of a break from there for a moment. Want to talk a little bit just as kind of a world building side of things. So I recently finished reading Lawrence Watt Evans's Night of Madness, which was a 1990 continuation of a series of books set in a world called Ethshar, that or called the world really, but the main nation is Ethshar, from probably I'm going to guess the 70s, 80s. But what it had is some interesting world building things going on that I was kind of building out of or sticking with or getting some ideas and things from. Essentially, the basic plot line goes that on the eponymous Night of Magic, or Night of Madness, sorry, a new magic was introduced to the world. The world already had several different kinds of magic. We get told about wizardry, theurgy, clerical magic, divine magic, necromancy, demonology. What else was in there? Sorcery. Herbalism was treated as a magic. Science was treated as a magic, both minor. I'm trying to think if there are other ones in there. Those are the ones that stand out in my memory. But this new one comes into play that eventually gets dubbed warlockery, which doesn't really roll off the tongue very well. But they were working off of this idea of it being similar to something witches could do back during a big war that went on 200 years prior to this, between gods and demons particularly. So this new magic comes into play. Every other magic has various limitations. Witchcraft is subtle. Demonology requires knowledge of demons and knowledge of the names of the person you want the demon to affect. Theurgy depends on the willingness of the gods to actually act or do something. Wizardry requires the right materials. It's basically classic D&D Wizards with material components and somatic components and verbal components. Sorcery was kind of strange, but seemed to... This is an element. This is the first book I've read in this world, so it maybe explained more in earlier ones, but sorcery seemed to be based on ancient artifacts and use of various artifacts. Let's see what else. So they all had various limitations, basically. The limitation on warlockery was that, on the warlocks, was that they would be... The more they used the power, the stronger they got. But the stronger they got, the more susceptible they were to being called to the source of the power. So once they hit a certain point, they couldn't resist that call any further. And all those who went to the source never came back. So there's that kind of flaw to it. The more you use it, the stronger you get, but the stronger you get, the more likely you are to run off and disappear and never come back. But what I found interesting with it was the way in which Watt Evans addressed and worked with introducing a new magic system or new magic into a established world. And this is not necessarily something that is completely unique. Other people have certainly done it in various forms, whether that be through like the later later Dragonlance books, like Dragons of Summer Flame onward, where they introduce, because then TSR is still then, or was it Wizards of the Coast then? Either way, whichever the D&D publisher of the day was introducing a new magic into the game. Therefore, the world and the setting introduced that new magic into the setting in the world, into the Dragonlance world, with the typical upset and everything else that comes out of that. But with Watt Evans, what really kind of stood out was kind of how he looked heavily at the social impact, the cultural impact, the political impact, and how other magics reacted to having a new magic in place. Especially how the wizards, who were the most powerful politically, socially, etc., magic who kind of set the rules for everybody else, dealt with having this new challenger that was actually fairly equal to them come into play. And that was an interesting take that came into this work. We had some leaders were kind of in the wait and see realm. Some leaders were very much, we want to exile. We want to prevent this from being a problem. There were a few leaders who were in the realm of kill it with fire type setup, or nuke it from orbit type things. But ended up being restrained because it was not necessarily feasible to determine who had the power and who didn't until they actually did something. So rounding up all of the warlocks would be virtually impossible. Expunging them would be virtually impossible because they looked like and acted like everybody else. So there were some interesting things going on as far as that went when they looked into this, when looking into like the social and kind of human nature side of things with it. What this kind of spun out with me was kind of coalescing a number of different ideas that had been kind of vaguely floating around in various forms. So the last year or two, I've been working on let me pull it up here so I can take a closer look at what I've got. Working on world building, working on a single setting. Basically, at the center is what I've taken to referring to as a junction. Sounded better than crossroads or some other options that came to mind. But basically, it's a place that is a city that is centered on the various places that exist on all of the planes, all of the realms of existence. So we have, we have the temple, which is sort of a massive temple complex containing thousands, tens of thousands of temples to various deities within the multiverse. We have the shop, which is that shop that was just there a moment ago but isn't now, that moves around, that kind of disappears, come back, and all those other sorts of things. We have the, what else did I throw in there? We have the library, which is sort of the ultimate or sort of library, these sorts of things. There are some things in the city that are starting to become places like that, like the Great Market is kind of starting to become something like that and is slowly inching its way toward, physically and otherwise, inching its way toward the place where all these other places are kind of gathered. But, possibly more importantly from that, there are all sorts of other things around there that there are also other worlds in the multiverse, because this is the junction is basically a center of a multiverse, and that multiverse includes various worlds and realms. The worlds would be what we would call material planes. For gaming or D&D terms, it'd be the prime material, essentially. For everything else, it'd be sort of like the realms would be basically all of the things that connect to all of the various worlds, essentially. So we get realms like the God's Home, where all the deities live. We'll have the elemental realms, which would be 6 in this case. So I took rather than going purely Western, or purely European, purely Asian, I took the mix of all 6 that were brought up in there. We have the air, earth, fire, metal, water, wood. And they all kind of orbit around each other in a weird way. and the mirror realm and multitudes of other things that kind of come into play there. So different realms that are attached to Dream Realm, these sorts of things. But then I've been building other worlds kind of around that. So the first ones to come in there were Earth, which I recently renamed ERTH to demonstrate that to show it's kind of an alternate Earth. So I can do some other things with it. Elhara, which was currently basically just a city. It's only about maybe 10 pages or so of stuff. That's 10, 15 pages. That is based, or is currently a city that is only development has been a city that is at the base of a volcano or a dormant volcano that harnesses the volcano for various arcane and other purposes. Going out of there, we've got so added Unestria, which I put together fairly recently. Unestria was a let's see. Unestria was created by the dragons, the fae, and the giants, and all of the peoples or species, races of the world come out of those three in one way, shape, or form, as do all the magics come from either. There are three magics that come from either the fae, the dragons, or the giants. Those are also three that have their own realms in the overall. So there's the dragon realm, there's the fae realm, and there's the Jotun realm. And that one, Unestria, is a kind of modern world after a fashion. It's basically late 20th century Earth technology or arcane equivalents. The island that's focused currently on an island that has one town and is essentially a resort island because of various inspiration and things that I had. When I'm working currently, I'm working actually two different ones currently. We got the Fairlands, which Faire, which are all of the various lands, of which there are 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, that are all touched by or through which the fair Faire, basically like a real fantasy version of a Ren Fair, travels through across borders and whatnot. And there are several of those. We got the Deathlands, the Drake, which were kind of semi-inspired by Fritz Leiber. I took the name from him, but did my own spin on it. The Drakelands, which were originally dragon-oriented, Refuge Forest, the Sea of Stars, the 7 cities in the middle, the Undying Kingdoms, and the Weirdlands, which are basically dominated by weird beasts. And there's Avendor, which I am in roughly 280 pages of handwritten notes for. I've got to type up someday. But basically that's focused around a large mountain complex that has one giant library that has several component libraries, and there's a school up further up the slopes, and a village, a town down at the bottom, down at the base. And there are also various places that move around, powered by essentially bound entities. Whether they are chosen to be bound or not is another story, and may also depend on each of them individually. Let's see. But as part of that, one of the things that's kind of been playing around in my head has been different magic systems. I like playing around with that in different ways. And that kind of creates new worlds sometimes around those. So one that I've been kind of toying with has been in the cosmology of the Junction, I've got this set of realms called the prime realms, or the prime elemental realms. And these are the realms of chaos, death, life, and order. That, according to the cosmology, are the 4 fundamental building blocks of the multiverse, even before you get into air, earth, fire, water, metal, wood. So building a magic system around tapping these 4 prime elemental planes has kind of been rattling around my head for a while. I've tried different iterations of it, and I'm working on a new one now, a new iteration now. That may add yet another world to this Junction multiverse. We'll see how that goes. Because I needed more stuff to work with in that regard. But what else is new? When one idea sticks, when one idea is there, more stuff just popping through. But I started thinking a little bit about that and combining some other ideas, like mixing in, if that's established, then what do we get for other, what if something else comes into play? Some other undefined magic system or capability comes into play. How do they react to that? How do they respond to that? And also thinking about things like, some thoughts have been going through about taking something like the idea of World of Darkness, or the kind of standard, which of course goes back to the standard urban fantasy trope of hidden magic or hidden paranormal beings, paranormal species. But taking that concept and putting that into a secondary world, so that a non-Earth world, so that we have sort of a classic fantasy world that has humans, it has, spellcasters, maybe magic items, that sort of thing, but doesn't necessarily know that it has things like shapeshifters or elves or vampiric beings or things or something along those lines. And we can make an argument that there are secondary worlds that play with some of that to some degree, but some of the big ones I would think you think of, okay, we say, well, for most people on Middle Earth, for example, elves were basically an unknown quantity. However, people knew them. People knew about them. They may never have seen them in their existence, but they knew that they were there. They were part of various stories, part of various histories. They were a known entity. They were known to exist in the world, even if people never really ever met them as such. For Gondor, for Rohan, dwarves there were stories. People knew about them. They knew they existed. They just maybe had never seen them before at all. They're also familiar with orcs, of course. I guess the closest you might find in sort of to that in sort of a Tolkien set would maybe be the Ents, in that the vast majority of the populace, basically the non-elves, non-wizards, or Istari, they were effectively hidden and not known about at all. But that's kind of pedantic side of the defining with it in a way, I think, where they were still known to some degree at least. But anyway, one thing I've kind of been playing around with or toying with is a secondary world, a non-Earth world, a more or less typical fantasy world perhaps, that's humans only, humans and magic, and no one else as far as anybody knows, humans are the only people who are there. But there are other species, other races that are there kind of in hiding that are not necessarily known about. And maybe tying that in with something about some lost, or a new magic or something along those lines coming into play that may or may not be associated with them. Probably not, though. So just some little things kind of thinking about playing with and working through and all that fun stuff. So, yeah. That could be part of history. That could be part of a whole bunch of different things that come into play. But some of that was kind of loosely inspired out of looking at this Watt Evans, or things that just kind of popped in my head to kind of work with or expand upon or come back to, depending on how I wanted to look at that, work with that. I think I'm going to go back here. Yep. All right. I'm going to go back here to play with the rest of Euphoria here after that digression. I'm not sure what I want it to look like inside yet. We'll get to that. That I'm going to hold off on. Maybe we'll get to that tomorrow. As far as origins, this was where things got a little interesting. So this place it's hidden. It's got it's an entertainment place. It's there to observe and monitor off-world beings. Let's see here. Okay, so its origins. Euphoria was created through, I think, so we got it as private and deity. A generous donation made to the temple of the deity. Oh, let's just name the deity. Why not? Let's just make up a name for a deity. Since I'm terrible with names, we're going to go ahead and take a look at a fantasy name generator. Where's one that I like and I want to play with? I like that one. That's a fun one. And let's see, what shall we pull from here? Let's go with, that's just a generic one, maybe. Yeah, I like that. Okay. Let's see what sounds good here. And usually with name generators, I will just kind of I won't take the full name that pops up. I'll just take bits and pieces of it or recombine them in different ways. I like that. Okay, cool. I like combining that one. Aemnius. The god of gates, doors, and protection. Yes. I'll throw an M dash in there. I like that. Okay. To keep to serve the people of the world. So basically I rolled up private and deity as combined creators, founders of this place. So we're going to go with, in order to interpret that, I am going to interpret that as some really rich guy or family or someone made a major donation to the temple of this deity, and then the temple decided to use that donation, use those funds to build the structure. Let's see, with the donation, let's see, over the course of the next few years, the temple quietly purchased every property in the block before beginning the process of converting the property, the buildings, before converting the process of converting the buildings. Cool, that looks good. They used a mix of magic and subterfuge to bring in workers to renovate the space to their desires and requirements, standards. After about a decade of work, extended due to the temple's desire for secrecy, the new entertainment was opened. Temple clergy and lay persons immediately set about a word of mouth campaign to spread to quietly and selectively gather the first opening patrons for Euphoria. Quietly, selectively gather. Yep, maybe that looks good. They outlined the rules regarding secrecy and guests, akin to a secret society or club membership rules, both of which were not uncommon among the socioeconomic elites of the city and nation at the time. The presence of both societies and clubs. Presence of both societies and clubs helped provide a framework for the first patrons to understand Euphoria's rules. All right, on that note, I'm going to run off for just a minute because there's something at the door I got to grab. And that is part of why my usual schedule is not when the mail delivery comes. Let's see. Okay, that's a good kind of startup. This is not supposed to be a full history. This is just a brief origin, so I think that'll work. I'm happy with that. That's about 600 words right there before getting into the interior description. That is pretty nice. I'm pretty happy with that. Go ahead and close that out. I'm going to hang out here a little bit longer. So yeah, part of what I do as I'm looking at things is think about different when I'm working with building, when I'm working with putting together a world, I'm thinking about the and then what, or the why questions. And that's some way in which the kind of randomizers, I think, help me in terms of spawning creativity or working with some creativity, is having that, how do we have a immense structure that is hidden and concealed, combined with a place that is an entertainment facility that has the purpose of monitoring or observing. And when we combine those four things together, we get the questions of, how does this work together? Why is this done this way? What created that? And that really kind of helps me, at least. Asking those questions kind of helps me at least put things together, and then kind of take that and run off to do other projects. So I like doing some of these short ones, just kind of like nothing more. These are like 500, 600 to like 1,200 or so words, so nothing too big, generally about 2 to 4 pages, just quick little simple builds. But I take those things, I take that kind of inspiration, I take those ideas and run off to other projects, other longer projects with that. So it's also a nice thing to come back to when I'm not sure where I'm going with something, with a bigger project or another build, and I'm just kind of stuck and saying, well, I'm at this point, I don't know where things are going, I don't know what I want to do with this. It's just not working at the moment. Go off and work on a couple of these little short things, little brief things, maybe 1 or 2 of them, and come back, and my subconscious has been kind of fiddling around with things and making connections and moving things around. So it's a nice little exercise in that regard that kind of helps out with dealing with things like writer's block and that sort of stuff. Which is a big thing I try to work with my students, both in terms of teaching and tutoring, because I am a college rating instructor and tutor, and something I do work with my students a lot with is, how do we deal with when we hit that wall and the rating's just not happening, but we have a deadline, we have a due date that's coming up. So what do we do? How do we deal with that? How do we work around that? And generally, I bring up things like work on something else, do some brainstorming, do some other pre-writing activity of choice. Brainstorming, free writing, clustering, webbing, same thing, outlining, listing, whatever, something that kind of gets back into that base level starting point to start generating some ideas, start working through some things. Or walking away, coming back to it, these sorts of things, just to kind of get the ideas flowing again. So for me, one of the things that helps in terms of world building is just to do some of these little short things. They don't really take very long. I can knock out, a place in an hour or so. Usually I can fill out an entire one in less than an hour. 45, 60 minutes, something like that. It's fairly quick, it's fairly easy, and it's just something gets that energy coming back, that kind of flow coming back into things, which is sometimes all that's necessary in order to get across or get through what to get back into the groove of things, as it were. And I think since it's been pretty quiet, I'm going to go ahead and I've got some other things that need to get done. I'm going to go ahead and leave it at that point. So I'll do a quick reintroduction at the end here. I am Brent, aka Werewolf Doctor, on most of the socials, Threads, Patreon, Ko-Fi, YouTube, Twitch, obviously. I think so. That's everything. I have a website. Link is in the chat and in the bio. And I am a author, amateur world builder, educator, writing tutor, sometimes editor, a whole bunch of other things. Hopefully see you around somewhere eventually. Bye.